Hello, welcome to AP Sources Simplified. We are continuing on with our exam review and are into the next section, contextualization. If you're interested in the review assignment, it is in the video information below. In this video, we are going to put John Adams' turbulent presidency into context by taking a look at the situation John Adams was stepping into and some of the controversies of his presidency. After the ratification of the Constitution, George Washington won the first election for the presidency, and it was never in doubt he would become the first president. Washington, at the beginning of his presidency, was universally admired in the young republic. However, several difficult issues sprung up during his tenure that would have great influence on the difficulties in the John Adams presidency. One of the major issues was disagreements about what direction the country should take. On one side was Jefferson, who envisioned a yeoman farmer republic with a decentralized federal government. He also wanted the U.S. to ally with France in their revolution, believing it was an extension of the American Revolution. Plus, France was such a great ally to the U.S. during our own revolution. On the other side was Alexander Hamilton, who envisioned a merchant and industrialized economy, with a strong centralized government. He wanted to more closely ally with Great Britain. While these two were competing for influence with Washington, John Adams was sidelined in the vice presidency role. These two competing ideologies ended up being the foundation of the first two national political parties, the Hamiltonian Federalists and the Jeffersonian Republicans. Meanwhile, there were continuing issues with Great Britain, including the British not vacating forts in the Northwest Territories and harassing American merchants in a variety of ways. Washington sent John Jay to negotiate with the British, resulting in a treaty. Many back in the U.S. thought that the deal was a bad one for America. However, Washington was eager to avoid conflict. There were also problems with the French. As their revolution became more fanatical, they began to attempt to export it to other countries, including the U.S. The French sent over a diplomat named Citizen Genet, who caused trouble for Washington as he stirred up radical elements of the American populace. Washington was able to maintain American neutrality despite great pressure from various factions to more closely align the U.S. with either Great Britain or France. Washington also worried tremendously about the growing political parties and partisanism. These were central themes in his farewell address as he left office. However, both the international issues and partisanism were not solved under Washington, and they would fall to the next president, John Adams, who will have an extremely difficult time dealing with those issues. So the largest issue that Adams dealt with was the international problems, namely France. It also exacerbated the political divisions within his own Federalist camp and with the opposition Jeffersonian Republicans. As mentioned before, the French Revolution had become more extreme, and France was acting more aggressive. They had started seizing American merchant ships, impressing sailors, and taking cargo. America sent diplomats to try to smooth the situation over. However, they were not afforded a normal diplomatic response, and instead were met by French bureaucratic middlemen who demanded a bribe, and the U.S. provide financial assistance to the French government. This was made public back in the U.S., and there was outrage amongst anti-French politicians, mostly in the Federalist camp. An undeclared naval war ensued with the French, now called the Quasi-War. However, it was not universally popular back in the U.S., as Jeffersonian Republicans hated the idea of war and bad relations with the French. Former President Washington urged Adams to appoint Hamilton as Major General, who began to make preparations for a large-scale war against the French. However, despite being in the same political camp, Adams and Hamilton did not get along at all. Hamilton thought little of Adams, and Adams thought Hamilton was too much of a political schemer and too eager for war with a powerful European nation. Within Adams' own camp were individuals more loyal to Hamilton than he, including the treasurer. They went behind Adams' back to support Hamilton's preparation for war. Eventually, Adams was able to reach a peace agreement with France, and shortly thereafter, he fired Hamilton's supporters. While Adams was losing influence in his own party, the opposition hated him even more. Elections were different in this time period as the runner-up became vice president, and so Adams' vice president was Thomas Jefferson. Those two men had been great friends during the Revolution, but now were bitterly divided, and soon into Adams' presidency, they were no longer on speaking terms. The pressure of his political enemies drove Adams and the Federalist Congress to pass the very controversial Alien and Sedition Acts. First, the Alien Act made it more difficult for immigrants to gain citizenship. The reason for it was that radical French immigrants would attempt to subvert the government with radical candidates for office. The act hurt the Jeffersonian Republicans as immigrants were a major base of support. The Sedition Act prohibited vocal and printed opposition to the government. This act took away First Amendment rights and was exactly what Jefferson had warned against ever since the Articles of Confederation were thrown out in favor of a strong centralized government in the Constitution. Some states even openly defied the federal law. Virginia and Kentucky passed resolutions declaring the law invalid as it went against constitutional rights. By the end of his presidency, John Adams was deeply unpopular and would go on to lose to Thomas Jefferson in the pivotal election of 1800. Okay, that does it for John Adams' Turbulent Presidency. If you liked the video, please click that like button, subscribe to the channel for more AP exam review and primary source analysis.